Well, I know you're going to provide us with some really important information, and it's nice to see friends on this. Joan is here. She had some struggles with the watermelon yesterday. I post photos of what my world looks like every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and several people, a lot of people post stuff. And Joan posted a photo. It's what my world looks like. What does your world look like? And Joan had a knife and a watermelon, and she couldn't get it out. That was fun. So she's saying, "I finally got the watermelon opened up." It looked like a good one too. Okay, I guess we can get going. The I'm very happy that you were able to join us, Luke Elzinga, the Iowa Hunger Coalition, and with DMARC, the Des Moines Area Religious Council, where you're policy and advocacy manager, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And you and I don't remember when we first met, but I'm guessing it was at the Capitol. Maybe?
Probably at the Capitol or a conference, some sort of local foods event or at the Capitol. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly.
But we run in some of the same circles, and it's always good to see you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also and I wanna share that you are a tireless advocate for people that are struggling, with people call it food insecurity and with hunger. I just like hunger. I just know that if you're food insecure some of the time, you're hungry some of the time too, but you're a tireless advocate. And I've seen you in committee rooms where everything that you say, the absolute truth, the struggles of everyday Iowans, and they fall upon deaf ears by mostly our Republican legislators. It's just like sometimes it's like they don't care what is said and from them, but yet you relay the struggles, and also you front and center the hungry. You let them tell their stories. And can you tell me why you center people that are experiencing hunger?
Well, I think they have the most useful perspective on the issue with their personal lived experience. And I think in far too many of those subcommittee meetings, it's a bunch of people in suits. And I'm sometimes one of those, people in suits. And it's not often enough that our legislators really see and hear from the people that their policies are going to directly impact. And so it's easier for them in a subcommittee meeting to hopefully not have to hear from someone who could lose access to SNAP, could lose their health care. It's really important that our elected officials hear the consequences of their actions uh, before they take them, after they take them, holding them accountable. And I also just think, in terms of organizing a movement, those are the people who are going to be directly impacted, and they should really be calling the shots, how this is going to impact them. I do a lot of leadership, but I always try to make sure I'm not straying from what I'm hearing on the ground and building relationships with people, even if they can't make it up to the Capitol themselves, to relay that to legislators. I think sometimes uh, people at subcommittees try to maybe have more of a gloves on approach. It's certainly something you need to be, you know, knowing how to frame the issue, communicating to people's values. But I think it's really important. You can't let people get away with things just because of decorum. I think speaking truth to power, obviously, you need to be respectful, but it's really important that our legislators hear directly from people. Um, they might have looked at a bill for a few minutes that could impact someone for the rest of their life. And so making sure that they realize the consequences of their actions, that's really important. And it's also just, I've had conversations with people who who feel like they didn't have a voice, or that, what's the point? And getting them involved in advocacy, getting up there at the Capitol, realizing their voice does matter. I went through a period of political apathy myself, probably 8, 10 years ago, where feeling like, what's the point? They're going to vote for this anyway. I get that, those feelings of political apathy, but you can make a difference. If you get enough people loud enough, we've pushed back successfully against some really heinous bills in the past. And calling them out is really important. Sometimes in those subcommittee meetings, I feel like I'm more speaking to the media than the members in that room trying to influence their position. There's a lot of times where we know this is going to pass out of subcommittee. Um, but what we need to do is raise those concerns, put pressure, so maybe this stops it at committee or stops it from getting a full floor vote.
Well, now you remind me of, I don't maybe the last time I saw you, the legislature was preparing to pass some very confusing rules on SNAP, and you held an event in the first floor of the Capitol where you had an educational session for legislators and for whoever was there, the media, whoever. And there was, a fun test to take about, to try to understand this bill, and it was very informative. And I left, and then I saw a senator, a Republican senator, and he was getting into the elevator. He was getting ready to get in the elevator, waiting for it to arrive. And I said, "Oh, there's an exhibit, a display. Iowa Hunger Coalition has something, and you had other sponsors too, I think, for that one.
Mhm.
But I said, it's a really interesting thing about how SNAP changes are going to damage and hurt people, actually hurt people. I said, come on, I'll go over there with you. Because he's my legislator. He's sort of a frenemy. I mean, I talk with him, but his really bad policy. I'm sure you have some of them like that. And he said, he just sort of snorted at me inside. Oh, hungry people. Well, why are there so many obese people in Iowa? If why are people hungry? I said, well, because the food system is broken. And he just, you know, huffed and puffed and got into the elevator. I couldn't even get him in the room. I bet you get that all the time. It's just this arrogance, and they know it all. And it's never the system's fault. It's always us not working hard enough or being pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. Is that your impression too?
I mean, there are certainly a lot of legislators who have that perspective. And the what you were talking about, that quiz, since January, Iowa has had the most restrictive SNAP waiver in the country in terms of what people can and cannot purchase with their SNAP benefits. And we were trying to use that as an opportunity to quiz legislators about how much do you even know? Because they were preparing to vote to codify those. They did. That passed in the Iowa Maha Act, codifying these waivers, this waiver going forward. And a lot of them didn't even know what they were voting for. I mean, we were raising the fact that under this current waiver, Pedialyte is banned from SNAP. I have not talked with a single legislator who thinks that's a good idea, but they were still willing to vote for it because that was the governor's priority. And so those are the really difficult conversations when you feel like you've built a relationship and you've got them to recognize the issue, but still are not willing to break with either party leadership or the governor. Those are some of the most difficult conversations for me. There's some people who are, sorry about my cat, some people who are maybe just more of a lost cause. I'm not probably going to persuade them. And that's not where I spend most of my time. It's really with folks who maybe don't have a great understanding of the issue. They maybe hear things in the media, but they don't really have a good grasp on all the finer details and all those unintended consequences. But there's certainly a group who are just ideologically opposed. And that example you bring up of obesity, I mean, we've heard that a lot. We hear about that in terms of these SNAP restriction waivers. And our message has been consistent. I mean, the reason this is it's not a um, it goes hand in hand, food insecurity and obesity in America. Because, like you said, it's indicative of a broken food system. The cheapest, most affordable food that for people to buy, the things that their kids are going to eat, that they can prepare quickly, that is going to be the most bang for their buck in terms of calorie dense, are highly processed foods. So, if we want people on SNAP to eat healthier, just banning certain items isn't going to make healthy food more affordable. There's a USDA study from 2021. I probably cite this more than any other study on SNAP participants' barriers to healthy eating. The number one reason people on SNAP don't have healthier diets is the high cost of healthy food. Banning soda and candy doesn't make healthy food more affordable. There's actually evidence that these SNAP restrictions are raising costs for everyone because of the cost for retailers to implement them that's getting passed on to consumers. And so I think when I get that response around obesity, it just shows that that person does not have a great understanding of hunger and food insecurity and how that looks in the United States of America, because it looks different than maybe a third world country. But it's a systemic issue. And it's going to take systemic solutions, not influencing people's individual behavior, if we truly want to tackle the issue.
Okay. Well, what's it like on the ground now? Oh, and I should say that for those that have followed, um, Jason Wallsmith's and our series on, hunger in Iowa, Portraits of Hunger in Iowa, Luke helped set that up. I mean, Luke set that up, and we were able to roll from that. So he's been very, very helpful. And this was in November when SNAP payments weren't going out. And now we had that, and, a month later or so, they were, reinstituted. Then we've had legislation. What's it look like on the ground? Where are people now? What has changed?
Yeah, this past year, probably one of the worst years in terms of negative policy changes to hunger and food insecurity. I mean, I think Feeding America's Map the Meal Gap numbers are supposed to come out in July. So we'll have some updated numbers on what food insecurity looks like. But just knowing what we see at our food pantries, it's getting worse every day. We have people coming in who don't know where to turn because they've lost their SNAP benefits. Um, Obviously, last summer, the passage of HR 1, One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the largest cut to SNAP in the history of the program, also the largest cut to Medicaid in the history of its program. We are seeing SNAP enrollment plummet in Iowa because of those changes. Refugees, other legal humanitarian immigrants kicked off the program completely. These expanded work requirements for older adults and certain parents, that is having an impact. And it's not that people are coming off SNAP because they're finding employment. They're not being lifted off SNAP, as the president keeps saying. No, they're being kicked off SNAP and they're not finding employment. They're being left in a far worse situation than they were before without access to food benefits. And we certainly see that at our food pantry network at DMARC. When I talk to other pantries across the state, it's the same thing whether you are in rural Iowa, in the suburbs, in one of the urban cores. Hunger and food insecurity is increasing. People are falling off SNAP. More people are turning to food pantries. And food pantries and food banks are getting less governmental support too. So that means needing to raise more funding from the community to make sure people get fed. SNAP enrollment right now in the state of Iowa is the lowest it's been in 19 years. I think I was a junior in high school last time SNAP enrollment was this low. Um, and that again is not because people are finding employment or being lifted off the program. It's because these policies at the federal and at the state level are pushing people off the program. And it's also reinforcing some really harmful narratives that contribute to stigma and shame, including this SNAP waiver that went into effect January 1st, restricting certain items. There is a lot of evidence that when program stigma is higher, that has a dampening effect on participation. And I think it's especially true in more rural, redder parts of this state. If you're at the grocery store and hear someone make a snide comment about someone who's using an EBT card, and you have been thinking about applying for the program yourself because you're struggling, how's that going to influence your decision? When you're hearing from someone you trust, a friend and neighbor, that is making a moral judgment on someone because of their participation in SNAP, there is a lot of evidence to show that people are actually making logical decisions in their mind when they're choosing not to participate in a program because that could lower their status in a community, in their church congregation, at their workplace, because they hear how other people, including our governor and president, are talking about SNAP and the people who use that program. So there's tangible policy changes that are kicking people off the program, but there's also it's just becoming less desirable to even think about applying. And they've made it so much more difficult to get benefits, despite what Stephen Miller may say. It is an incredibly hard process to get SNAP benefits. They're making it harder every day. I've heard horror stories from people who have been on SNAP before and are suddenly getting letters in the mail asking them to verify all these other things. And if they don't get that in the next 3 days, they're going to lose benefits. There is so much happening because of these changes at the federal level and state level that thousands of people are being pushed off of SNAP. SNAP enrollment's down 9% since the passage of H.R. 1. The county that SNAP enrollment has fallen the most since H.R. 1 has passed is Butler County, home of Senator Grassley. And I don't think that's because there's an inordinate amount of fraud that was being tackled in Butler County. I think it's because it's a rural county, it's an older county. These work requirements for older adults are hitting them especially hard. And that's what we're seeing when you look at the map. The biggest drops in SNAP enrollment are in some of our small, rural, older counties.
And those are people, you know, some of them don't even have a grocery store nearby. Gas is expensive to get. I mean, Casey's becomes the only place that you can get anything, close by within we'd recently moved, but it was 20 miles to Albia, to Knoxville, to Pella, to Eddyville. I mean, so we were in a food desert. But I mean, so that's the situation that we're describing for a lot of rural people, aren't we?
Yes. Yeah, and they're paying more. You are paying more when you're buying fresh produce from a Casey's versus if you were buying it from a full service grocery store a lot of the time. You're paying a premium for less access.
Mhm. I want to see what you think about this concept. I wrote a piece a while back. I found an old woman on the sidewalk and went up to see if she was okay. And she was having mental issues and she didn't have the care or the treatment that she needed. And she was at a local food pantry. Thankfully, she was getting some food. But I wrote a piece and it was about structural violence, where we talk about these things as if they're policy. We think about these things as policy, but when the state denies you the opportunity for, just having access to the basic necessities of survival, when the state opposes it, doesn't make sure that that you have a means to feed yourself, to eat, to have water, to have shelter. When the state precludes that, in part by, the minimum wage is so low, the subsidies that we give to Walmart so they don't have to pay their people a living wage, those things aren't policy decisions. They're structural violence. This is violence. Uh, Kim Reynolds not implementing food programs that feed hungry children in the summer is violence? Why don't we call it violence rather than, "Oh, we have policy differences"? No, this is violence against children, against workers, against families, against everyday Iowans, and it's cloaked in a narrative of policy and ideology.
Yeah, you make a really good point. And I mean, I'll be honest, I tend to use words like harm more than violence, and maybe that's pulling punches, you know? But I think for some people, when they hear that, it's a strong word and it provokes sometimes a strong reaction, including people who try to deny that that's the case. But when you walk through it, I mean, these work requirements that are happening for SNAP, that's going to be happening for Medicaid. Just this week, the Center on Medicaid, CMS, put out guidance on how people can claim an exemption from these work requirements. And this is something that Congress did not pass, but this is, a reinterpretation by the administration that is going to make it a lot harder for people with HIV, cancer to automatically be exempt from these work requirements. They're going to need to go through a whole new set of hoops, doctor's notes, things like that. In some cases, people with a terminal disease are going to have to prove that it's preventing them from meeting this work requirement. And I don't know how much more of a clear example you can get that this is violence, that it can literally will likely result in people dying. And so I think you're absolutely right with that framing. And I think I do think though that there are some people who are just not willing to use that language. Like I said, it's not always the language I use first, but I think when you're talking about it in a structural way, one of the kind of taglines of the Hunger Coalition is hunger is a policy choice. And you're right, like, it's deeper than that too. And these are decisions that are being made. You brought up the example of summer EBT. I'm very grateful that the governor changed her mind and came around to participating in summer EBT. And, we got in a little bit of trouble for basically making a comparison to Scrooge that first year, where days before Christmas, she said we were not going to participate in summer EBT. But, the story of the Christmas Carol, even Scrooge can learn some lessons and come around. I don't think we saw a full transformation, but at least on this issue of summer EBT, we held the governor's feet to the fire. We did not let up, and we continued to push. And I think that sometimes after a loss, sometimes there's this kind of feeling of like, okay, we just got to kind of hunker down, regroup for what's next, rather than continuing to push and demand better. So I know I went off on a tangent there, but your summer EBT, I just had to mention that.
Yeah, and I was texting with a friend this morning, trying to schedule a meeting next week, and she said that she had a problem with her car. She had a car payment. Now she's behind on her rent, and she's contemplating what she's going to do. Is she gonna get general assistance or whatever and jump through all these hoops? She has a full-time job, and and so I guess my point is that if my friend is there, that close to the edge, most of my friends are that close to the edge. I'm not quite that close, but, a couple of months without a Social Security check, and I'm in trouble. My family's in trouble.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's something, it's a safety net that we all need and that we all pay for with respect to this is why we need government. Government providing these kinds of safety nets that help Americans make it so that we can, live a good life, um, work hard and be able to pay for food, for shelter, but we're not there. We're on the edge, and something's going to break. It's going to break, and it's not going to be pretty. Am I too pessimistic?
I don't think so. I mean, if you just look at the current trajectory where we are seeing more and more people going hungry, um, there's a reason why, well, in the past, we have funded international food aid as a peacekeeping measure. I mean, that's going away too. And so I think, yeah, that breeds conflict. If you are put in a position of feeding your family, I mean, this is something they talk about in any sort of like ethics 101. Is it okay to steal food to feed your family? Things like that. Um, I mean, if people are put into desperate positions, they may take desperate actions. And I truly don't know what the end game is. I mean, I think I know that the end game is totally slashing SNAP, ending the program entirely, but I don't know what comes after that for, in terms of a conservative worldview, what, and the MAGA like theory. I don't know what that end game is. Just people die. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's deeply concerning just seeing the trends of hunger and food insecurity increasing, a safety net that's not less reliable. And I will say, when I've talked to people on SNAP, they don't have a high degree of trust in government because they don't see it working for them. Their maybe only interaction with the state is an HHS worker who has treated them with disrespect, or an application that they've been waiting 60 days to know if they're going to get their SNAP, and the law says they should have gotten it in 30. And so when you have systems that are intentionally designed to make programs inaccessible, create barriers, that also breeds a mistrust in government. If we had a government that was by the people, for the people, working as I think a strong democracy should, I think people would have greater trust in government and have greater trust in, these are how I want my tax dollars used, to make sure people are fed, to make sure people have health care. But when they see a government that in their view is working against them, what incentive do they have to participate in democracy when they just feel like they're being beaten down by government all the time?
Yeah, I don't think this is what our founding fathers foresaw.
No.
It's a completely different world. I mean, and we haven't, I know it's being dismantled. Our systems are being dismantled, and it's all of them. I mean, I was reading about, they're taking sensors off the ocean floor, thinking that we don't need the science of ocean currents and other kinds of science, ending child cancer. Anyway, the system is broken. And at the root of it, I'm just going to say the root problem of it is the structure of capitalism today. And something has to change. And do you have any idea? I know there's no simple solutions, but if I gave you a magic wand, is there anything that you would do to make things a little better?
Oh, that's a tough question because you're right. Like, it's not just attacks on SNAP or food insecurity that we're seeing, it is across the board. And I think, oh, yeah, if I had a magic wand, there's a lot of really popular policies that I think do not get acted upon by both parties because of the root of money. And so if I could change one thing, it would be getting money out of politics. I'm not saying that would be an overnight cure, but I think so much of what is halting progress, and again, like, public opinion is on the other side a lot of times, is the corrupting influence of money in politics. And I don't think necessarily that it's like buying votes, but it's certainly buying the politician you want, who is going to vote the way that you want.
Mhm.
And that also breeds distrust when people are saying, "Hey, this is not what we want, and why aren't our politicians getting it?" Because of the corporate influence and that over our politicians. That also, you know, prevents a lot of progress and breeds distrust. And like you said, it's very much tied to our capitalist system where wealth is continuing to accumulate at the top. The us versus them is not a middle income person and someone who's homeless. You are so much closer to someone who is living on the street than you are a billionaire. Like you said, I feel like every month a new study about, 40% of Americans couldn't meet in $1,000 emergency repair or things like that. Um, I get calls all the time at our food pantry network of people who are like, hey, I donated in the past. I never thought I would be in this position. And so many Americans are one health problem, car accident, lost job away from needing to use a food pantry, from needing to use SNAP. And that's where the vast majority of Americans are. The us versus them is really the 99% versus the 1%, in my opinion.
When you wake up in the morning, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is just all the advocates I work with, the people I have relationships who use SNAP, who there's a gentleman, Mark, I work with pretty closely. He's housed now, but was living out of his car for a while, and he is one of the most badass SNAP advocates I know. And seeing him do so much when there are groups and organizations that aren't doing half as much as this individual, that's what gives me hope, is the fighters out there who are not willing to just sit idly by, who are putting up a fight, like you, Bob, like our friends at the Hunger Coalition, Food System Coalition, DMARC. That's what gives me hope. And seeing a lot of young people, get into the movement too. And also older folks who have been doing it for decades that I still learn so much from. And, it really is. And I should have sent you this along beforehand, but I came across, I've been digging into some just history of SNAP in the state of Iowa and came across a study that was done in 1984. Governor Branstad issued it. It was a Hunger in Iowa survey. Reading through that is just so incredibly disheartening, because not only is it the same issues, things have actually gotten worse. And some of the recommendations in that report, I wouldn't even try to recommend now because they'd be viewed as too radical. like, and so seeing that and just knowing, at DMARC, we celebrated our 50th anniversary of our food pantry network. It's not a good thing that we are serving more people now than at any point in our 50 years. But we're not giving up. And there are people who have been in this fight for decades who have not given up. And I get a lot of energy from that. That's what keeps me going is the other people in this space who, refuse to sit idly by, like I said.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm going to have to break the news to people that are here that you are departing to Alaska for a new job. There's a whole lot of people that are going to miss you and your advocacy. You've done great things here in Iowa, but you're moving on, I understand, to Alaska. Want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. It was a really hard decision to make. It's very bittersweet. I'm going to miss so many people. I've also been telling people I'm just an email away, and I know I'm still going to be causing some Iowa trouble probably from afar. But there were a lot of things that led to the decision. Just on a personal note, I've been dealing with a health issue since 2024. Iowa's hot, humid summers have not been easy on me, and Alaska's a little bit cooler. But also, I hope I'm at least leaving the state in a better place than when I started at DMARC 12 years ago. I feel like we've built out, a strong coalition. We had some wins this past legislative session. maybe not some huge ones, but we did have some victories and held the line on some other really bad changes that didn't get through. Um, I hope we're seeing a shift. After primary night, I was really excited. And some of those local races here too, just in Des Moines at the supervisor level. I hope we're seeing a shift. Um, you know, uh, Sarah Trongaria in the third district, a close friend of mine. She worked at DMARC previously. Um, I think we have some real bright spots, and making the choice to leave was not an easy decision to make. But for a few reasons, just felt like the right opportunity at the right time. So I'm not leaving the food space. I will still be working in the space up in Alaska. And also my wife moved to Iowa for me years ago. I've always said I'd return the favor, and she lived in Alaska 7 years, has some great friends up there, and so it's something we've talked about for a while, and I think just the right opportunity at the right time. That being said, still a really difficult decision to make. I have so many friends here who I know will be lifelong friends. And what I've been saying is this is goodbye for now. You know, the way technology and science is progressing, who knows? Maybe there's going to be a cure for vasculitis in the near future with T cell therapy or something. I'm holding out hope, but just prioritizing my own health has been something that I've just been learning over the past few years, and I've definitely pushed myself too hard at times and have paid the price for it. So, yeah, not an easy decision to make, but I hope I'm at least leaving the state in better hands and in a better place than when I started at DMARC 12 years ago.
Well, I just have to you know, thank you, and I think that so many people are better off that, maybe, I don't know how many, thousands of people are better off because of what you and what DMARC and the Hunger Coalition do, where people are fed, actually working to get people fed. It's such a noble, noble thing to do, and thank you for doing it. You made a big difference. I'll miss you, and a whole lot of other people will. And we wish you the best, and thank you so much. And thank you all to everybody that came today to participate. And let's give Luke a round of applause and thank him and wish him on his way to a prosperous and good future.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, and best of luck. Keep up the good fight. I really value our friendship. You're always, being up at the Capitol is not my favorite thing, but seeing you up there always brightened my day. So
Thank you. So bye bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
thanks. See ya.